Hello, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio. This is episode 98. New music, new Vaporwave. So we're talking about music that was released in January of 2024. The brand spanking new albums to listen to and check out. And
right.
Yeah, this is quite interesting because I know in our talks, Burke, you were very wanting to focus more on brand new music.
Yeah. I mean, I think we kind of both were, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things is that we've both commented on is that you always see stuff come out, but the way we had maybe short-sightedly in the beginning structured the show is around like topics and themes, etc. You have to have like everything work out such that two albums, if you want to do two new albums, you have to have kind of two new related albums that you can connect thematically in some way to make an episode out of. And we didn't have to, obviously, which we're showing today. You know, it's our show. We can do whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
But you can kind of get into thinking like, oh, that's what I have to do. So the plan was to really break out of that this year and have one episode a month out of the however many we do, however many Mondays are in that month, be about new music. And I had said within the last 30 days, I'm sure we won't be super strict with that, nor do we have to, because it's our show and we can do what we want. But yeah, the idea is to like just kind of get tired of doing yet another retrospective on Vaporwave classic albums, as I've said many times.
Yeah.
You know, they've been discussed to death and they're good. And if you haven't heard them for whatever reason, it's awesome to raise awareness of that. But I want to talk about new stuff and kind of stay up to date on what's going on and also fight some of that like old man inertia of not looking at new music anymore. So all around, it's just an excuse to really look at new stuff. And I think there's going to be a lot of feeling out process with this because I still don't know quite how I want to do it. This episode is still going to be structured very quotes traditionally, where it's going to be kind of, we each picked one album and we'll do a segment on it. And however long we talk about it is how long we talk about it. And it may be short, maybe long. We'll find out. It's not very planned. But I can see that format shifting around because it was actually hard to pick one album to talk about. Because as soon as you start caring about all the new music coming out and all the stuff you want to talk about, it's like, oh God, I want to do everything. But our survey episodes, in a good way, are almost always a disaster of like 2 minutes of trying to talk about everything. So you obviously can't talk about everything you want to talk about. But then that little overthinking part in the back of your brain starts to get worried. Like, oh, well, what if I pick this album and this person thinks I didn't like their album as much, even though I did it? It was a very good album. And now I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about this other album. So, which is maybe silly, almost absolutely, surely silly, but still makes it hard to pick. So I don't know, like maybe we can in the future add even like a little shout outs section, right? Where you have the two albums that you listen to and you discuss in more detail, but each come in with like 3 to 5 things that also came out that people should check out. I don't know, like just as like to help promote and engage with the community and cross awareness. Boundaries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Or, this is some sort of call to action, I guess, indirectly is, do you want a bunch of shout outs? Do you want just 2 focused discussions on arbitrary albums at the expense of not being able to talk about others? Do you like the scattershot survey rambling nonsense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's also like we've pretty much entirely neglected EPs, right? Like very short, like the 2 to 4 tracks, usually like that are 10, 20 minutes at most. And there's a lot of interesting music being released. A lot of artists also release just singles in between albums, and the idea of an album itself is kind of like not quite anachronistic, but like it's not like what it was 20 or 30 years ago, right?
Sure.
Like culturally and business sense. So there's a lot to explore, and there's a lot of interesting music being made. And as we'll talk about in this episode, the Vaporwave is ever changing, ever mutating with the times. Like,
genre's changing. The artists are doing different stuff because
new artists are coming in.
New artists coming in and out all the time.
Yeah, older artists or more established artists are reinventing themselves.
Yeah,
so,
as they should. Not because they have to, but because you should never be afraid to do new art, which is what I always say. But the singles point is also really good. Yeah, we didn't talk about EPs. Today we're recording this on a Bandcamp Friday. So, of course, my email is flooded with everybody putting out singles, including one of the people we're talking about today put out 2 singles today. But we don't talk about those. We also, there's so many physical releases or like physical re-releases that probably won't get counted. I don't think we'll do if there's a vinyl reissue of some old album or something. I don't expect ever to do that. But maybe, a physical release of something relatively new, because sometimes an album will come out and then they'll see how it does. And if it does well, they may do like a limited cassette run. Yeah. Like a month or 2 later.
Or if it's a Wax Cylinder, any Wax Cylinder release, we'll cover.
Yeah. Yeah, we have covered the have there been others? Just
I don't know, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
I did order my first mini disc last 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
But I don't have a mini disc player and I need to figure out
yeah, my brother left behind, lived in Japan when mini discs were popular, so he has a big wallet of them that he left behind. Nice. And so I need to get a mini disc player to check out what he was listening to.
I know I've said this before. I know I've said this before, but like stupid 12 or whatever year old me had some silver Sony mini disc player.
Ooh.
I loved that thing. I just didn't know to take care of it. I didn't know it would be back.
Oh no.
So I think it's probably long gone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was like awesome because I can just record my own music onto it. It's beautiful. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I don't need no CD burner. I don't need a 2x CD burner that takes an hour to write a CD. This is amazing.
There's this old video on YouTube of the Sony made it of promoting the virtues of the mini disc and what you could do you couldn't do with other things. And it's this guy just zooming around.
Oh, we watched this in movie night.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if I watched it with you or like on my couch.
Yeah, but just kind of repeating like these 15-year-old kids standing around me like, it's an optical disc technology. Like,
yeah, hello, like, fellow youth. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Like, you can write bits and bytes to you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting music and culture being made. And like, there's a lot of haunted shit out there. you know, like, God, just. Thinking about like how, with Steamboat Willie hitting the public domain, like just the sheer amount of hauntological material being made from people like finally we can make Kit and Mickey into a serial killer is just one example. Yeah.
I did see a good joke back when Steamboat Willie, and this is way off topic and we'll get back on track here in a second, when it went into the public domain and I feel like it was one of the DDS guys, but I could be wrong, but they're joking like, if you're just now deciding you can do fucked up shit with Steamboat Willie, you don't really understand like how to fuck with copyright law to begin with. Like
parody and satire, man. Yeah. There's loopholes, man.
Yeah, it's just in the SEO thing now because everyone's writing articles about how it's in public domain. So if you make your little Steamboat Willie joke, it'll get picked up. You'll be on the BuzzFeed or whatever.
I've literally seen at least 4 video game trailers based on Steamboat Willie. And like a fucking movie trailer that was like animated in Unreal Engine. It's so dumb. Yeah, that could be a Patreon bonus episode. All the Steamboat Willie shovelware, Steamboat
like
shovelware.
The immediate shovelware.
Yeah.
Do you think there's like factories? Man, okay. I'm going to save this conversation for that Patreon.
There we go.
Episode.
We did it. We did
it. We brainstormed live on air. Okay. I think this intro has cleared my conscience about the pains of picking just 2 albums when, there's like 30 you want to talk about. So to everybody who released great new music in the last month, we literally hear you.
Yeah, it's true. Well, let's dive into the first album.
Let's do actual albums now. That
is from track 5, Light Sleeper from the album Dated New Aesthetic by Windows 96. And no, your phone is not ringing. It's just that sound that resonates deeply with me and for years. And this is one of the reasons why I love this album. Yeah, Dated New Aesthetic is Windows 96 newest album, came out in January. Great album. Cover art of it looks kind of like a Sailor Moon having a moment, has that famous bunny haircut, little palms. But yeah, it's a really interesting album that Windows 96, of course, is a well-known Vaporwave artist.
You've probably at least seen the cover art for 100 Mornings.
Yes.
In your YouTube algorithm. It's one that pops up all the time. It's like a full album recommendation.
Yeah, the YouTube version of that has like millions of views, I think. It's super popular. It's one of But Dated New Aesthetic is a fascinating example of this new direction. Vaporwave artists, both established ones like Windows 96 and newer artists are heading now. So because they're blending a lot of new genres together, using original compositions, incredible sampling, like, oh God, that cell phone signal, loose cable, I want to talk about that more later, but it's still about like comfort and nostalgia versus like anxiety and ambiguity, I believe. Like it has this sort of like the timeline of Vaporwave has sort of moved forward into the early 2000s. That's sort of where it's really focused now, not so much the 80s or 90s now, which is nice. So now we're in the PlayStation 1 Dreamcast era. There's also been renewed interest in genres that were, I think, popular in that round or in that era, like breakcore. And you heard a little bit of that breakcore influence in Light Sleeper, which is an incredible track. Yeah, this is a really complex and varied album. There's a lot of different directions it takes. There's a big shift towards the middle. I mean, I love this album. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And yeah, it's really interesting to see Windows 96 try so many new things, and most of them pay off really well.
Yeah, I really, really like this album too. It was almost my album pick, but I thought with maybe some of the genre connections like breakcore and stuff, which I didn't know how much you were into. You're my EDM guy. So yeah, and video games, I thought maybe you would pick it. So that's why I picked something else. But yeah, it's really good. Obviously, Windows 96's work. The sampling is interesting. So you talked about like sampling moving up and the aesthetic kind of moving up to 2000s, which I agree with. Like a lot of this sounds like PlayStation 1 video game music.
Yeah.
But I don't know if this has always been the case, and I just never paid attention. It's probably what's actually happening. But I feel like when you I didn't do it for either of these albums, but when people sample snoop a bit, like the samples are also getting more and more obscure because maybe like they strip mined so many classics, or it's like less about the genre itself has become less about critique of like 80s or 90s and more about like enjoyment and appreciation. So it's like less using pop music from an era in, Plunderphonics talked about in the original essay in the 80s was like cutting out Michael Jackson stuff because he's so popular that it's like repurposing something super popular into something unrecognizable.
Yeah. Kind
of the opposite of what it is. And this just feels like people taking music they really, really like or dig on and just making new music out of it, which is also cool and also in the spirit of the genre, of course. But I just feel like when people sample Snoop stuff, it's no longer like Fleetwood Mac songs and stuff. It's like obscure R&B or like lesser known smooth listening and stuff. And I don't know if that's, changing sensibilities, avoiding the copyright sentinels, more readily available samples because so much random shit is you can just get now.
Yeah.
In the past 10 years. I don't know, but I just think it's interesting. I think it's probably a thing where it's like a selection bias just because, I didn't dig up unrecognized samples back in 2013 or 2015, and they probably would have also been lesser known things, and all the ones you do know are what sticks out in your head after 10 years. That's what I'm thinking is happening. But I just do feel like when people like talk about sampling stuff, it's like much more niche, getting more niche and niche in like a good way.
Yeah, that first wave of Vaporwave, the sampling was designed to be recognizable. Like it was, I'm taking this existing thing that and altering it in a way that it's so to sort of, and that was the point, right? And but like artists now, like that's already been done. You can't just do the same thing over again. So even if it wasn't just because of content ID systems, they would have to do you can't just keep doing the same thing. If you want to establish yourself as an artist, you have to do something new. So I think that's why it's sort of gone past that, like, oh, it's recognizable. Now it's more, the music concrete plunderphonics, taking recorded sounds as an instrument, seeing how I can mutate them.
Double checking myself live on air. I'm sure, like I said, it's always been the case. If you want to go, like, I don't know how famous that Diana Ross song is that led to that which shall not be named, the most famous Vaporwave meme track. I don't actually know how much of a hit it was at the time.
I mean, there's a floor for Diana Ross, right? Like, even her most obscure track's going to be pretty well fucking known. Yeah.
That's what I'm banking on, to not sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, even though I don't. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting. I just feel like when I try to sample Snoop stuff, it's much more, obscure, or like people have gotten so good at like cutting up 50 samples into one seamless pseudo, like mega sample.
Avalanches style, like.
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
Girl talk, mashup artists. Yeah, that kind of thing.
I mean, even more fine than that of like, I'm taking just the snare out of this and just the kick out, like super, super subcomponent sampling.
I mean, the thing is with this, I don't know what is a sample aside from the fucking cell phone signal, which I cannot. It's neuron activated. It really. I felt it in the core of my soul when I heard it, because I was like, oh my God, my phone hasn't done that for years. Oh, it's the album.
It's like the VGM version of putting like police sirens in your music.
Oh, it really is. It's such
the internet equivalent.
But I applaud it. So yeah, I don't know what else is a sample, or what is sourced from something else. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those more video game themed ones were sampled from video game soundtracks, but I wouldn't be surprised either if they're original compositions. It's hard to say.
And the line, to continue along this, the line also gets really blurred because, again, it's probably always been the case, but I'm more aware of it now, is that a lot more like augmentation of samples by like redoing the drums or punching some aspects up and stuff that also makes them a little harder to identify. Again, this kind of subcomponent of, I'm no longer sampling the song. I'm sampling just the guitar stem from the song or something like that.
Oh, yeah. I could see that. There's also sort of like a real interesting distinction between like the first half of this album and the second half, where the first half is very like clean video game feel. And then once we get it's an 11 track album. And once we get to Light Sleeper, the track I first sampled, it starts shifting into more complex compositions and more. I think the second half of the album is the best half. I really like where it's going.
Yeah, I agree. I think that track 6, Turning Point, was the one I also noted because I really love, track 5 was the one you sampled, right? Light Sleep. Yeah, sorry. Track 6, Not a Puzzle or a Riddle, has like all kinds of like layered pitch bending, like warbly out-of-tune synth and stuff. And then heads into, I don't know how to describe the back half other than just vibes, which is a word I hate to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like track 10, like that just droning synth. I should probably start looking. The track, it's just like a nice build up from this opening low drone synth into all these different elements coming.
The first half is very clean, right? Like it's very like precise synth instruments and video game soundtrack kind of feel to it. Yeah, and then track 10. Why don't we take a listen to that? So the track is called I Should Probably Start Looking. I love this because it has some steel drums in it, and gotta love some steel drums. And it's interesting because one thing I noted about this album is, this track in particular has kind of a slow, almost ambient opening with some stereo whispering, which was neat. But it really builds into a tune with some like heat, like almost not quite the coked up 80s outrun synthwave, but somewhere in between. Like if you look on the Bandcamp page for this album, it is tagged Twilight Synth. And this is the only album in that category. It's something that Windows 96 came up for this album. It's like, oh, I get it. It's not quite as energetic or frenetic as like Outrun, but it's definitely not like a sleepy ambient kind of track. It's right. It's pretty nice. So yeah, I really love this track.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one that stood out to me. And then other little track standouts just for fun bits. Track 2, Nocturne Button Presses, playing games at night. A lot of little duty MIDI horns in the middle. Which I'm,
more steel drums. Yeah.
More steel drums. Yeah, great. Throughout this, great auxiliary percussion. A lot of like cowbell, steel drums.
Oh yeah, love the cowbell.
Paves, other type of stuff. And then there's little meows and Take a Guess. Track 3.
Oh yeah,
I like the little meow singing. Meow meow meow. So those are other points that stood out to me.
I like in track 4 the unknown creature sighting. There's some like DJ vocal call outs a little bit of it's very fun. And there's also like the end moment of reflection gets a little psychedelic towards the end, which is another tag this album uses. Also uses the chill wave tag, which makes sense. But yeah, this is a really interesting, complex album, but still, and it's a new direction. Like I said, a new direction for Windows 96. I'm really interested to see what they'll do next. But this is really fun. Like, and one last note: the YouTube version of this has a little Windows 96 logo bouncing around like the DVD menu image. So it's I like the little visual for that. So good job, Windows 96. I appreciate it. I see you.
And that was a bit from track 2, Electric, from our second album, which is KEYGEN by Crystal Eternal. Crystal Eternal has been discussed previously for the Arcade Girl EP, I believe was on one of our compilations. I know I've talked about 1-900 Love Motel as being one of the first cassettes I got when I kind of got into collecting cassettes.
Mm-hmm.
So Crystal Eternal is a future funk vaporwave artist, currently out of Ohio. Also a killer artist and graphic designer, like visual artist. So she did the album cover for this album. And I chose this album for a few reasons. One is I've talked a lot about wanting to get into like different types of vaporwave and future funk and stuff that's a little more upbeat, not normally in my wheelhouse of like signal wave, slush wave, real down tempo, real ambient stuff.
Yeah.
So this was a chance to do that. And then also to shout out. So she organizes Nostalgia Lounge, which is in the Midwest Ohio IRL vaporwave shows. I think they just had their first successful show a week or so ago, and like Frank Jeffsey and stuff was there. Looked like it was pretty packed and a lot of fun. But I also want to highlight this upcoming URL, which is an online show, which I believe is currently called Sanctuary, and it's to raise money to fight regressive laws in Ohio, where they're passing a lot of anti-trans shit. It's infuriating.
Yeah.
And Crystal Eternal is a trans woman, so she's fighting back against it by raising some money for some local charities and getting involved. So I just also wanted to have an excuse to put that in the show note. I think right now it's just in the organizing, accepting artist applications phase, but we'll talk about it more as it gets closer to actually launching. If you actually want to have more like artist interviews on that stuff, she was just on the hot takes for like 2 hours the other week. Worth checking out. But as for this album itself, so this album is released in January, last month on Business Casual Records. Again, I wanted to get into future funk. I did like Arcade Girl EP, and so I thought it would be a good opportunity. And yeah, I really like this album. It's interesting. It is definitely not what I usually listen to, and took me a little bit of time to grow on me. But it has so many good elements that it wasn't hard. It's just like my mood can sometimes be so mismatched to this type of music that like you
going from
need
slush wave to this, man. Yeah.
You need like a phase realignment period before you're like what you're doing. But so for example, that sample from track 2, Electric, I kind of picked it because I think it has some of my favorite aspects of almost every song, which is that like on every single track, whatever the low end or bass or synth bass is doing along with the drums is always great. That rhythm section, bass and drums, not the genre, the section of a band, in every single song is killer. I felt like I was repeating myself over and over again in my little notes where I'm like, man, the bass is really good. And I love when the drums come in. Yeah. Man, when the bass comes in, it's like every single track. Genesis, which is not about Terminators. Maybe it is. I should ask her. But even that has this like kind of airy, welcoming fade in, and like these pulsing keys. And then, like 2 minutes in, all the drums and everything, there's all this layering with all these synth arpeggiators going on. And I started the same thing with Windows 96, where partially because I try not to think about it too much and just listen to stuff and enjoy it. Yeah, you don't know what's sampled and what's added in and how much stuff is chopped and torn apart and kind of rebuilt. So you just kind of get into like enjoying it. There's some stuff that like obviously samples, like track 3 Catharsis has like a virtual space tech ad sample that plays a few times and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably from something. I don't think she's doing that. So what did you think of the album?
Well, one thing that really occurs to me is that this is also a great example of like how genres are evolving, like, because this is clearly a future funk album, but this is future funk that is not just like, hey, remember city pop from Japan in the 80s?
Right.
Yeah. So like there's a real interesting, not many Vapor albums we review have songs with lyrics in them, with singing in it. And like this does. And it definitely works. Yeah. I kind of saw this as like future funk by way of like synth pop in a lot of ways. And
yeah, I can see that because some of it's pretty bright and like upbeat and like close to synth pop, but again, not quite like just skirting all these different little genres. It's cool. And it's like less in my memory. I'd have to re-listen again just to refresh myself, but it's like less directly future funk Vaporwave than like Arcade Girl EP. Like, it feels like there's even a little bit more going on.
Yeah.
I don't know, like a little bit more of a genre evolution, which is cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's why it's really good to review brand new albums, because this is like where Vaporwave is. A lot of people, like, that's the common joke about Vaporwave is, it's still stuck in the 2010s, but like, hey, look, these artists who are still, using Vaporwave to describe themselves are still like creating really incredible new music that sounds very distinct. Oh yeah, just as a minor aside, for our listeners who may have a very legitimate background and are not involved in any chicanery, KEYGEN is a type of software used to generate a license key for software. So if you pirate, say, this very expensive software that requires you to enter in a license key, the KEYGEN will create one, so you could use the software without paying for it, which is very illegal and we do not condone. Definitely don't do that. But
also highly relevant, because I can't believe it didn't occur to me to mention this, even though I know what a KEYGEN is. Those old like KEYGEN stuff comes out of like what used to be called like Whereas and whatever, which is like where you just how you used to pirate software. You shouldn't do anymore. Pay your Adobe subscription fees. If you go look on YouTube, and this is something we should episode on, they had like wildly tropey but kind of banger EDM tracks on all of those. It's like trance EDM tracks, I remember.
Oh yeah.
And that being like some of my first exposure to that music. Not that I was doing it. I just happened to open them up just for the music.
Yeah, that actually is that type of music. It's called a tracker. I forgot why, but it's a music sequencing software that's basically programmed in. So it's like making a song like basically through assembly, right? Like it's just so they're very small files. And so because the demo scene which is a whole thing, it's only 50 kilobytes for this banger trance thing in a tracker. We'll throw it in our KEYGEN. And so like as you're waiting for your software, your pirated software to be installed, you were listening to this cool tune. Yeah, so this is evoking that past. Yeah, I watched a hour-long documentary on it on YouTube. The trackers scene is wild, and we should definitely do an episode on that, because like
that'd be really fun. I can't believe I didn't think about the music, but it is almost like its own subgenre of chiptunes in a way, and this is like a high fidelity version. Sometimes I don't know. It's interesting. I think the one thing that do you want to talk about is kind of the most noticeable aspect of this album, other than the killer drums and bass and rhythm section, is the vocals.
Yes.
Throughout this. So there's a lot of like pitched up, like vocoded kind of sound like to me. I don't know how much all of it is, because it could be that the lyrics are all chopped up to the point where I couldn't recognize them or quickly search them. But I do think I have in my head that is her singing.
Yeah, I assume so. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was because I remember when I was listening to this, I was like, oh yeah, she's asking like on Discord about like vocoders and other stuff. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense now. So yeah, so there's a lot of like kind of repeated lyrical phrasings that tend to connect to the track songs. I think this first, I guess technically in track 2, it's most noticeable because it keeps saying gonna like make you feel like electric and stuff.
Very airy.
Yeah, exactly. I think it becomes more pronounced. So, track 4, Not Quite What You Wanted, has that as a repeated phrase. And that track is interesting to me because it's like, to me, the way it's like this weird mix of like melancholy and triumphant. I don't know, like, because like the music is a little melancholy, not like super much to me. Yeah. But the kind of like the not quite what you wanted, but almost like, but that's okay. It's kind of like implicit. It's like so that, I don't know if I'm misreading that, but that's kind of how it came back to me. But then sneaking in a second sample, track 6, Windowsill, which has all of these different vocal styles coming in together at once. So yeah, that's a bit from that middle of track 6. And, there's like the kind of the vocoded processed vocals. There's more natural sounding vocals. And it's just all this nice layering coming together.
I really like the singing in track 7. Like that was an earworm for me. Like it's such a good earworm. Like, man, it's over. Tell me why it's over. It's like, that for me was the best track on the album. That's a banger. Like that is like, that's why it was also, I think I was leaning so heavily into the synth pop like influence because because it's like that pop music of like a really good hook to get you listening to the song and remembering the song. So again, it's so different, but it's still vaporwave. Like it's really nice.
Yeah, I really like that track too. I like the slightly different vocal processing. So that like different people are saying, tell me why, and it's over. It's very subtle. It's kind of obvious, but it's noticeable. And then like the last like 30 or 45 seconds, like that repeated tell me why over and over again. But there's like all these like water and like phaser synth samples underneath, like the audio effect, not the Star Trek weapon, but underneath is it kind of like is like such a good outro for the whole album and the song in general. Like it really works.
Yeah. If you thought like Future Funk was like stuck in a rut, like listen to this and you'll see that people are taking it and like really expanding what it means to be Future Funk and what Vaporwave is. And yeah, it's really cool to see this idea of bringing bits of different genres into Vaporwave and doing a fusion album essentially is really cool. So I don't know if this, I mean, like the last album, again, it's just for individual tracks, right? Like there's like a little bit of synth pop in this one. There's a little bit of breakcore in Data New Aesthetic. And I really like how cheery it is, but like there's still this alien sort of like weirdness to it. Like again, by vocoding the vocals so much, it was really noticeable for me. Like on track 4, it's very cheery, but man, those vocals sound quite alien. Really nice. Yeah. I'm definitely going to have to look up what Crystal Eternal's other work is. I've not, aside from what we've talked about on the show, I don't know if she's released anything else.
Yeah, she's a couple albums. And I mean, like I said, Bandcamp Friday, and she has 2 singles today that are a little heavier, actually, than this, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, cool. Like I'm really familiar with Windows 96 and stuff. Yeah, I'm not really dived into the Crystal Eternals discography yet. So
yeah. So it's a good opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We had a lot of fun listening to this brand new music. We hope you had fun listening to our discussion of it. And go check out both those albums. They're both on YouTube, I believe, as well. But don't forget to support the artists if you can. And in our next episode, we're going to be looking at some more new Vaporwave, the best Vaporwave, officially the best of 2023, according
That's right.
Yeah, according to the Vaporwave subreddit, which is basically, like the Pope speaking to Catholics. It's official. We can't argue with it. We just have to.
That's right.
It's up to us to understand why it's the best. So
Reddit has released the white smoke and must answer.
Yeah, basically. So that'll be a lot of fun. I've listened to some of them. I think we've mentioned some of the albums on there, but there's quite a few of them on there. Actually, there's like 15 or 20 or something. 20 albums. So it's quite a lot. So this will be a broad survey. But don't forget, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/nightclerkradio, where we have bonus episodes and we talk about things. We also have a lovely Discord community and where we talk about the episodes and share links and mention a lot of music that doesn't make it to the show because there's just more music than we have time to podcast about it.
Stop making so much music.
Stop all the uploading. But we are also on Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, nightclerkradio.com for our website. Please rate and review us on your podcasting app of choice, whatever it is. Apple Podcasts is adding transcripts soon to all podcasts, so you can read us as we talk about things sooner or later. But yeah, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.